Hey guys, this is Lorenz, and welcome back to the Ketones and Coffee podcast. And thank you so much for tuning in. I know everyone here that's listening are here because you want to create a sustainable, healthy lifestyle through the ketogenic diet. And every single week, I try to bring in guests that not only has the knowledge, but these individuals has also been through the same trials that we all have been through when it comes down to our search for a better health. We get together in hopes to assist you on your own journey. Our guest today is a mega successful entrepreneur. He finished his undergrad in psychology and neuroscience at a prestigious school at Harvard University. And during that time, his fascination with brain and brain function has led to his passion to developing and building his successful nutrition food company from the ground up. His ultra healthy brain boosting protein bars are now sold over 7,000 US location and growing. Guys, he is the founder and CEO of Iqbar. I'm so honored to be joined by Will Nitze. Will, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I love that you're here to share some knowledge and the experience that you've gained all throughout these years. Brain health, and your passion to developing a snack that tastes so good. And I've had them. I told you before the show. They were so good, uncompromising, but they're also so good for your brain. For the listeners that are not familiar with you, Will, tell me about what you do and a little bit about IQ Bar.
Sure. Yeah, so I have no background in the food or nutrition world. I studied psychology and neuroscience as well as political science in college. So I really got interested in the brain in particular, just physiologically and psychologically speaking in college. And then I couldn't figure out a way how to create turn that into a profession after college. So I took a job in software and was working really long hours and started feeling physically and mentally worn down on a daily basis,
Mm.
and got really into nutrition really through those struggles. I put it together that my terrible diet at the time was contributing heavily to how I
Mm.
felt and feeling bad on a daily basis. And so I just became really interested for my own benefit in nutrition at that time, and couldn't really find anything out there that was brain related. I was mostly
Mm.
interested in nutrition as it relates to the brain. I wasn't trying to lose weight per se.
Mm.
I wasn't trying to build a ton of muscle. I was then and still am mostly interested in nutrition as it relates, in terms
Mm.
of how it affects the way we think. So couldn't find any ready to eat product that was geared towards that. Everything was totally bodily focused. And so just kind of started tinkering in my kitchen, and one thing led to another. And that was how I got into the food business.
Man, and 7,000 locations after, here you are today, leading into founding your company. You pointed out and talked about identifying that your diet were, or your diet at the time, um, to be the cause of, some headaches, fatigues that you've experienced in your mid 20s. And in my opinion, Will, and I believe it doesn't matter how much we know is true. If you don't take action, it doesn't help anyone. You've clearly taken action, right? Um, Everyone wants to lose weight, look good, but not everyone is willing to do the work it takes to get there. Or is it that simple? You talk, you've studied psychology and neuroscience. Um, you've clearly taken action. Like I said, maybe I'm getting into the psychology of things here. Um, can we agree that the brain decides what you do, or does food steer us away from what we should be doing? What's your
Uh,
opinion on that?
maybe rephrase the question. So you're basically asking. I mean, certainly the brain decides what we do. The brain
Mm,
decides decides everything.
mm,
But you're asking if like the food we eat
yeah,
impacts the way our brain works and
yeah.
thus impacts
Mm.
decisions we make.
Yeah, in a very smart society we live in, will that we should know the best possible food for us, since we label food as junk food, right? And yet consumes them religiously when everyone else knows what to do but doesn't take action. Will, um, how were you able to break that habit for you, when it's not so obvious for a lot of people?
Um, you know, I don't I don't know. I Because
Mm-hmm.
clearly most a lot of people who eat junk food, they keep
Mm-hmm.
doing it even though they feel bad as a
Yeah,
result,
right.
right? Like, so my first inclination is, well, I felt bad, and it was worth more to me to fix that bad feeling than
Mm.
to eat a tasty bowl of cereal or something
Mm.
like that. but but I think other people will have a different calculus that
Mm.
goes through their head, and they'll just eat that bowl of cereal. So it's hard to say exactly what like gets you over the hill of
Mm.
deciding to make a change. It's kind of like, you know if people want to lose weight, like what gets them to that point where they're at that breaking
Mm.
point where they're like, okay, I'm going to make a change. Because it can take years or decades even where they didn't make the change. So it's
Mm.
hard to pinpoint exactly what it was. I think partially, like, I just learned that you can eat foods that are delicious or that are satisfying your cravings,
Mm.
and also feel good.
Yeah.
It's not even a trade-off if you're smart about it. And I
Mm.
think a lot of people don't necessarily get that. They think it's like eat healthy and
Yeah.
be miserable while you're eating, but feel good physically, or vice versa. And so I think probably that was it. It's
Mm.
enjoy.
How would you describe your food relationship? Were you you know, what type of foods do you like before this? Like, do you love, pizza, pasta, or are you somebody that's always been healthy, wanting to eat healthy?
No, well, I guess I've always wanted to eat healthy. I certainly didn't for a
Mm.
long time. I mean, I was like any other kid who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. Like, I would eat like Fruity Pebbles and,
Mm.
you know, chug milk at lunch and have
Mm.
tons of bread and pasta. And, that was kind of like everyone did that.
Mm.
And there was like the low fat diet in the 90s. And, so I don't think I'm even different than most of my peers. Um, but you know, again, I'm not even necessarily. I've never really been so interested in food just for food's sake.
Mm.
I'm interested in feeling good.
Mm.
Because you're
Yeah.
eating.
Where does that come from, Will, for you? Is it just performance wise for you, just wanting to perform better at work, or where else does that come from? Do you have a history of uh, chronic illness in your family, and where does that where did you get that fire? Because it's again, I talked to a lot of people on this podcast on how they finally made that leap, make that decision, finally taking that action. It almost always takes somebody getting their back against the wall and telling themselves enough was enough. Where again, where did that uh, decision making come from you? You said you've always wanted to eat healthier, but not necessarily for food sakes, but you want to perform better. Uh, is that accurate?
Yeah. What if I were to pinpoint one thing? I read a book called Grain Brain by David
Mm.
Perlmutter. I don't know if you read that, but basically that was like a major aha moment for me, where basically it was saying, you know, we have all these people who are getting Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or other neurodegenerative
Mm.
diseases, and the common misconception is everyone thinks, well, they're genetically predisposed to get that, or that was just going to
Mm.
happen anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
the argument he makes is the reality is they ate, tons of carbs for like 3, 4, 5 decades,
Mm-hmm.
and then stuff started falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff, they weren't thinking as clearly as possible throughout that time, but then even worse, at the end of that time, they developed, a neurodegenerative disease. And so for me, that was like, whoa, like, I'm a young guy, like, I still have, I mean, the truth is anyone has time to change their diet, but like I don't want to go like basically he painted a terrifying picture. He basically painted a picture of your brain being on fire effectively on a daily basis. Your brain
Mm-hmm.
being inflamed chronically. And again, there's all these things people just take for granted, like, oh, you're supposed to get tired at 3 p.m. or you're supposed to feel lethargic. That's just what it's like
Mm.
being an adult.
Yeah.
Occasionally you get lethargic, and the reality is, no, that's just a function of a bad
Yeah.
diet.
You're
So
supposed to get sick because it's in your genes.
yeah, so that was what really blew my mind, and then I started reading tons of other authors on the
Mm.
subject, and there's also paleo was getting really big at the time, and
Mm.
Whole 30, and so
How did that work for you? What diet are you on right now?
I really just follow generally a low carb
Mm.
diet. Rarely am I fully in a ketogenic like
Mm.
state. I just, I've tried that, and I think it's great to do intermittently. But
Mm.
just in terms of just a sustainable diet that I know I can do is effectively cutting out, bread, pasta, rice,
Mm.
etc. That goes a really, really long way. And I don't have time to like obsess over everything I put
Mm.
in my body. Like
Yeah.
I'm so busy. Like, and I don't think that would be psychologically,
Mm.
helpful
Yeah.
for me either. So that's kind of where I'm at.
On your talk, I was watching your talk at Google. You talked eloquently about people blaming everything except food. Um, sorry. So on your talk with Google, you talked eloquently about people blaming everything except food. I agree because we sometimes become a prisoner of the moment. We want instant gratification, right? I'll do it tomorrow mentality, right? Let's be honest, we can be so blind to the truth, no matter how glaringly obvious it may seem, right? This epidemic that we have going on with diabetes, obesity, inflammation everywhere in your body. When we crave food, it's the brain, isn't it, that tells us to cheat when we can't have something we want it more. Have you ever got into the psychology of that? Um, just how we make decisions, breaking habits.
Totally. I think,
Mm,
I mean, there's obviously this is not an original thought or anything. Many
mm,
people have talked about this, but like we're wired to want carbohydrates
mm,
because we went for long periods of time without having food, and you can carbs are a great way to get quick
mm,
energy and store fat quickly. And then you don't eat, you're a hunter gatherer and you can't find food for days and you can
mm,
survive off that. But um, obviously we're not pre-wired for a world of abundance, but we still have that. So we still have that hunter gatherer kind of like DNA. But you know, what we found is obviously you can rewire yourself.
mm,
So, I mean, a good example is like coffee, right? Like the first time anyone drinks coffee, no one likes coffee. Like it's inherently not a good tasting liquid, right? But over time, you drink it enough times and it's a learned affinity for coffee, right? Like I drink coffee like twice a day or whatever, and I hated it when I first tried it. But it's kind of like that's like a prime example of anything. Like when you stop drinking Coke every day, and then you go 6 months, and then you try a Coke. It's disgusting, right?
Mm.
It's like
Yeah.
sickly sweet, and you're like, oh, why? How did I ever like this, right? So
Yeah.
you can
Do you have that now? Just when you go, go back to those habits
yeah.
of, yeah,
Sometimes I'll try like a Coke, or I'll like try something I had, like a Hostess,
too sweet.
snack, or like whatever, like things I would crush when I was a kid. And it's like, holy crap, like how did I eat this? This is so sweet and like
Yeah.
gross, but at the time, of course, you loved it. So it's just like
Yeah. Knocks
the,
you out too after.
the body is so reprogrammable
Mm.
that, to get back to your question about like the
Mm.
psychology of it, you can change your desires.
Mm.
Like, you can change what you crave. You can
How do
crave
you how do you
healthier food.
how do you break that habit though, Will? When it's how did you ever experience some withdrawal after you let go of sugar? Like, do you experience that craving? Have you ever fasted, Will? When you fast, you get those cravings,
Yeah, I have
right?
fasted. I'm not a huge faster, but I do like the 16/8, like,
Mm.
don't eat breakfast, basically, and um, regimen of intermittent fasting. Um,
What does sugar does to your brain, Will?
well, basically, I mean, again, no one listening to this is probably news to you, but effectively, it spikes glucose, which then spikes
Mm.
insulin, which then ferries the glucose out of your blood
Mm.
into cells, which then turns into glycogen slash fat,
Mm.
right? And then, that's throughout your body, and then it spikes your glucose levels in your brain. And your brain needs glucose. And your brain runs predominantly off glucose, but can also run on ketones, obviously, but always predominantly will run on glucose. But when you spike that glucose, right, you're buzzing. It's as if you
Mm.
like took a toke of a cigarette or something, right? Like, it's
Yep,
like
yep.
it stimulates you. But what goes up always comes down, right? So basically, overexcite your neurons, and then your your blood glucose plummets below what an ideal level is,
Mm.
and then you feel lethargic. So your body effectively overcorrects, which is why you feel like crap. Whereas if you had never really spiked it in the first place, you'd have that kind of consistent level. And your body's quite good at managing glucose levels. You can, through gluconeogenesis, you can turn fat or protein into glucose. So while your brain needs glucose, it doesn't mean you have to consume carbs to then create that glucose. Your body can create glucose.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, there's obvious things like gaining weight, but just think about the next time you consume carbs, and just think about your head, and feeling fatigue, and being just a step slow, a step less sharp.
Mm. You said something your talk at Google that's really interesting. Um, in your talk, people are still falling into the obesity and diabetes traps, and you said experts are not really experts. What did you mean by that? And can you elaborate?
Sure. I think I gave that talk like 4 years ago, so I'll try to remember what
Mm.
I was thinking at that time. But, you know, the reality is, people who are quote unquote experts don't like to say, I don't know,
Mm.
right? Everyone has to have an opinion on. I think this is more broadly an issue in society, but certainly in the medical field, right? You have, let's say, doctors, right? Which is where most people get their nutritional information. And doctors know almost nothing about nutrition, right? So they know roughly what the average person knows. I think they
Mm.
take like a few hours of classes on nutrition in medical school. So unless they're just have interested in it, on their in their free time, they're not experts. Period. They're
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good at fixing broken stuff. If you break your bone, they can fix it. They can reset it. They're not good at they're good at reactive measures, not
Mm.
proactive measures. And the problem with, so certainly doctors are not experts. Then you get into people like nutritionists, and the reality is there's certain things we just don't know. We don't know, like the whole meat versus vegan sort of uh, dilemma.
Mm.
You have athletes who perform incredibly well on a high meat diet, and you have vegan athletes, right? I think we need to acknowledge that people can thrive in multiple diets. It
Mm.
is nutrition is necessarily very personalized. I think there are certain things that are fairly objectively just not good for you, like dairy, for instance. Like there's just no reason to consume dairy. Like why would you consume dairy?
Mm.
There's just um, there's better alternatives. You can get your fat elsewhere, and you can get calcium elsewhere. So it's like,
Mm.
the jury's still a little bit out on it, right? But there's a very high preponderance of evidence that many people are dairy intolerant, and maybe everyone is somewhat dairy intolerant. So it's like there's just variety, but you have these quote unquote experts who are like, dairy is good or dairy is bad, or eggs are good or eggs are bad, and
Mm.
it's just you experts aren't experts because purported experts disagree entirely on
Mm.
major things. I think one thing that everyone can agree on is the big categories of you know um, don't eat sugar. Everyone agrees sugar's bad. Everyone agrees.
Yet,
Yeah.
yet they don't do anything about it. Well, given the popularity of other lifestyles now, and the globalization of social media, um, keto or paleo or other diets have seen quite a bit of popularity in the past few years. Where do you see this epidemic going, the diabetes epidemic or the obesity epidemic? Do you see it getting worse, or do you see it with the help of social media being popular with these diets? Do you see it getting better with your
Um,
with the growth of your company as well, right?
yeah, I mean, clearly people don't like being overweight. People don't
Mm,
like feeling terrible, right? So
yeah.
diets have that going for them, good diets. You know, the problem is sugar still tastes good, and fast food is still cheap. Um,
That's
so
right.
it's always going to be a problem. It's always going to
Mm,
be a problem. Um, you know, the, I don't. I wish I was more optimistic. Honestly, I don't. I haven't looked lately at the data of like obesity in the U.S., but I think it's
mm,
still really bad. So yeah, you have these really, and also think about all the people who went on keto and then quit. Right?
yeah, yeah.
It's not like it's just like a cure, and you did it and now you're better. It's like it takes diligence and consistent adherence to healthy eating to maintain overall health, right? So it's more of it's not a question of like, are these certain diets reaching people? It's like, are they reaching people and permanently changing the way that they consume food and beverages? That's the better question.
There should be a sugar prohibition.
I mean, I didn't even hate the Bloomberg soda tax idea in New York, and I'm not
Mm,
even. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
if you're honest about it, like sugar is just as bad for you or worse as cigarettes or
Mm-hmm.
alcohol or what have you. I mean, heart disease is the number one killer in the U.S. What causes heart disease?
Mm-hmm.
Obesity,
Yep.
largely. Um, so I wish I was more optimistic, but certainly the better products. It's like it's like the whole censorship debate. Like you fight bad speech with more good speech, not by censoring bad
Mm,
speech. I feel the same way about food. Like create more good food that's healthy and crowd out. That's probably more effective than like
mm.
banning bad food or
Mm.
something like
How
that.
do you talk about it in gatherings? Like have a little fun with it. So let's say at a pizza party, how do those play out for you? And being an advocate, how do you approach it? And how do those play out, Will, for you? Do you do you go out and talk about eating healthy, or do you just let them choose for them, right? Because at the end of the day, it's their choice, right? But how do those play out for you personally?
Yeah, I'm never like, no one ever changes anything by someone saying, "Hey, you should change this."
Mm,
Like that's not really how people make decisions. People make
mm,
decisions because internally their self-talk is really the only thing that will ever change something. Like you have to hate yourself or be disappointed in yourself or have a desire to better yourself or whatever. I mean, certainly public pressure and peer pressure works. I think it's
mm,
infinitely less impactful though. And it's also obnoxious. It's like, I'm not, it's sort of like, if you've ever had a relative who's an alcoholic, say, think about going up to an alcoholic and saying, well, why don't you just stop drinking? You know,
yeah.
or you're at a pizza party and you're like, well, why don't you just not eat that pizza? It's like, you're never getting anywhere
Yeah,
that way, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
think you have to, the person has to eat that pizza and then they have to like feel terrible. And then they have to do it 10 more times and feel terrible 10 more times. And then they're like, maybe I should eat, tuna instead or whatever. Um,
yeah,
I just feel like you have to learn yourself. You have to make mistakes
yeah.
yourself.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, even with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, some people would just be so trusting. I'm not saying don't trust your doctors with what they're giving you. I mean, it's helping you lower your blood glucose levels, but I mean, there are other options out there. I mean, information is out there, free information is out there, but you just got to be careful what information you're absorbing, right? But nonetheless, it is out there, right? Um, yeah, I mean, it's their decision, it's their choice. Definitely, they gotta be able to have that desire for themselves to get better, right? It's I can't tell you what to do. It's just gotta be coming from you. Let's talk about building this business. Will Iqbar, what was your vision for this company when you got started? I know you quit your job, right? 9 to 5. I know you worked at a software company. You talked about that, but how did you ultimately make that decision? Okay, I'm gonna quit my job and pursue this. Um, and I think you went all in at the beginning. What was your vision for this, Will?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's a preponderance of variables that push you over the edge. I don't think it's ever one thing. Like, for example, in my case, I had a job. I didn't really like my job. I, wasn't that passionate about the industry. Um, I, I was working long hours. I was getting paid, okay, but not great. Um, so there was that. It was like, okay, I don't really love what I'm doing.
Mm,
And do I want to do this for 40, 50 years? No, probably not. There's your age, your stage of life. I was in my mid 20s, no kids, no dependents. So it's like, okay, well, I can take a risk. And if ever there was a point to take it, it's probably now. And then there's, you know, an idea or um, an intuition, right? And then there's like your personality. I think some people could have the first three of those things, but it's just not in their nature to set out and do something like that. Um, and then there's some people who don't even have those three things, but they're just like always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Maybe they even like their job, but they,
Mm.
so it's different for every person. But for me, it required all of those things, and then also I have an entrepreneurial kind of spirit, and so yeah, I just that was kind of like the perfect storm of elements, and I had this concept, and I created some decent prototypes, and I didn't go all in. I actually asked my boss if I could work half the time and work on the idea half the time. So it was almost like I like half quit. I was like, look, I'm a valuable member of the team. I know that. I know what I can do. I know it's going to be hard to replace me.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't I work, 20 hours a week, and you cut my salary in half, and you can start looking for my replacement. But in the meantime, I'll smooth out that transition process, and then in exchange, I can
Mm.
live. I make enough money to pay rent and buy
Mm.
groceries.
How long does this go for?
Yeah.
Part time. How
Sorry.
did that go? How long did that go for?
It
Working
was
part time.
like it was longer than I thought. I think it ended up being a year. Actually, I thought it was
Mm.
going to be like 2 months, and it was a year or so. Because the other nice thing about that is that it doesn't put you on the clock. Like you're
Mm.
not like, oh shoot, I gotta finish this prototype in the next 2 weeks because I'm gonna run out of money. It's like, no, you know, don't rush anything. Like make sure everything's right. Um,
Mm.
and so I don't think you don't ever want to feel under the gun. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I mean, I would recommend doing that. Anyone who's thinking about like starting their own thing, that's certainly a great way to do it. Of course, you have to be good at your job. You have to be hard to replace, and your boss has to like you and want to help you. So, all those things have to be true. Um, but then again, I also did a Kickstarter, which was helpful because that kind of helps you validate or not validate your idea too. So you can
Mm.
people either say, "I want this is a good idea," or they don't. So that gives you more confidence to really dive in. So basically, I actually quit my job right before the Kickstarter
Mm.
and then ran it. But let's say I did that and ran the Kickstarter and it was a failure, I might think, ooh, I don't know. But but it was a big success, and so I was off to the races at that point.
What year was this when you started?
I did the Kickstarter in December 2017 through January 2018.
Mm. How did the first year go for you?
It was a whirlwind. It was great. I mean, it
Mm.
was just like getting my feet under me, setting up an Amazon account, setting up a website, figuring out how to
Mm.
fulfill. I didn't know how to do any of this
Yeah.
stuff. Where do you store stuff? How do you fulfill orders? How do you handle accounting? Like, how do
Mm.
you got to set up
You were doing
corporate
everything in the beginning, first year. You were doing everything, accounting, all that.
Yeah. Well, I hired an accountant, but everything else, yeah. Set up a bank account, set up a third party logistics setup, set up the manufacturing relationship, all that I did.
So when did you realize that this is something that you were gonna be doing for a long time? When did you realize that? Because you can't possibly know that in the beginning because you're just testing out the waters. But when did you know that this could be a sustainable life for you, starting IQ Bar?
Um just when if you grow, it builds confidence.
Mm.
More customers, more sales. You start getting to a point where like, okay, this is a business, If you're doing
Mm.
20, 30, 40, 50K a month, it's like, whoa, okay. Like I
Mm.
could survive by doing this. And I could raise money based on these sales. And, I think it's much tougher if it's kind of a slog and you're not growing and all that. I luckily didn't experience that. Certainly it's a major roller coaster, but
Mm.
there was always interest and people always were intrigued by the concept. I mean, that's why I say, like, if you want to do something, never ever do something that's 10% better, like,
Mm.
than whatever else is out there. Like, it has to be a totally new idea. Otherwise,
When
don't do it.
when you started, was there, this is granted in 2017. Was there um a lot of protein bars like yours, or are you the only one that's focused on brain health, or what was your niche at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it was us. That was it.
That's it.
Yeah, we were really the first one. So
Mm,
again, that was interesting to people. They had never really heard that pitch
mm,
before, which is, I think, why it's intriguing to people. If it were just another like nutrition bar, it's like, who cares? Like, what,
yeah.
it's just going to be such a difficult journey trying to be 10% better that it's just not worth doing.
What's the hardest part in the beginning, would you say?
You have to like build your muscle tissue of just the
Mm,
lifestyle period. Like you have to be able to withstand long work days, 6 7 days a week. So just like the overall lifestyle is tough. You have to be just a chronic learner. You have to
mm,
be able to absorb information and turn it into results fairly quickly. And all of that just kind of wears on you for sure. I think everything's tough. Hiring's tough. Manufacturing's tough.
mm.
Setting up a 3PL is tough. It's all tough. I think the aggregate of all of it is what's tough, which is just what people call burnout, you know?
Mm.
Just like, I mean, you get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, I have no energy left. Like,
How many employees do you have now, Will?
there's 8 of us now.
Mm, mm. So, man, I've had your matcha. That's a good one. And are you working on any more products in the future, or are you working on something different?
Yeah, we're
What's next
coming
for
out. We're coming
Iqbar?
out with a hydration stick pack product called IQ Mix, which we're
Mm,
we're very excited about. So it's really like the first ever electrolyte plus brain nutrient hydration product,
mm.
stick pack product.
When is
Um,
that going out?
Coming out in a couple weeks, actually. We're
Oh,
doing our production
nice.
run, first ever production run next week, and then yeah, probably the week after we'll launch it. So yeah, that's scary. It's a totally
Mm,
new form factor, new market,
mm,
new
mm,
customer base. There's certainly overlap in customers, but there's also a lot of people who just don't eat protein bars, but
yeah.
they are interested in hydration. So we're going to have to develop a lot of new learnings, but sort of the first step in platformizing ourselves as a brain and body nutrition
Mm.
platform.
Who do you find are interested in your products, like demographics, or what's your audience like? Who is your audience with IQ Bar?
I mean, it's ketogenic people, it's
Mm,
vegan or plant-based people. It's basically anyone who is cares about their diet.
mm,
You're never going to get the person who would have eaten a Reese's peanut butter cup. Like you're just not going to get that person. Um, but if someone cares about low sugar, low carb, and
yeah.
maybe they're even keto,
Mm,
that's a home run customer for us. If they care about, you know, plant-based protein bars, that's a home run customer for us. Oftentimes they care about both. That's even better. Um, Interestingly, those are the biggest forces. The brain element is still huge, but is secondary to that. People mostly think first diet first, then sort of secondary functionality second.
mm,
So things like, you know, is it good for your brain, or is it good for my heart, or whatever? People pick up a bar and they're like, how much protein, how much sugar, how much carbs, and then they're like, okay, and what else?
yeah.
Is it clean label? Is it good for your brain?
Yeah.
But the first cut is like the macronutritional cut.
Mm. Man, there's so many products out there that has ingredients that you can't even say. But your products, man, you talk about um, 6 ingredients that are good for your brain. Can you talk about those 6 ingredients real quickly, just briefly, and something unique about your product?
Sure. I won't go into all of them, but I'll give you a couple examples like, omega 3s, flavonoids. That's one a lot of people probably don't know. It's the chemical that's in fruits and vegetables that gives them color,
Mm.
but it's really good for your brain. Medium chain triglycerides, MCTs, lion's mane. Lion's mane is probably the most interesting or nuanced. It's a mushroom. It's what's called an adaptogenic mushroom or an adaptogen. It basically just means it helps your body adapt to stress and
Mm.
other negative impacts. Um, so yeah, I mean, we sort of coalesce around these nutrients, and not so much in a supplement kind of a way where we're you know putting we want to be a food, we want to be a snack, and
Mm-hmm.
so we don't want to dump a bunch of these highly concentrated powders into a product. Instead, our angle is what's the nutrient, so vitamin E, for example, and then what whole food is the richest in that nutrient. So almonds in a
Mm.
vitamin E context. So okay, let's have the entire bar be almond based, um, and so on and so forth for every nutrient, rather than putting a bunch of vitamin E powder in the bar.
Mm.
So that helps us have a clean label, be whole food based, and also it helps you not sell a bar that's like $12. You can sell a bar that's $2, because there's
Yeah,
also that
that's a
reality
that's
of
a factor.
there just is a price people are willing to pay for a bar.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I want to be respectful of your time. We went over time, man. But where can they get your products?
Sure, we're on Amazon. Our website, eatiqbar.com. Sprouts, Walmart, Wegmans,
Mm.
Kroger, Rite Aid.
Mm.
But our website or Amazon's your best bet, probably.
Awesome, man. This has been a blast. Will, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your knowledge here with my listeners. And get that bar. I definitely it's uncompromising with taste, man. I believe so. And good luck to your company and to more success to you, Will. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you. Take care.